not what you think I am.
Captain Mar-Vell first debuted in the comics back in Marvel Superheroes issue 12 in 1967. That first iteration of the character was an alien superhero, a Kree named Mar-Vell, who came to Earth initially as a spy for his race, but then took a liking to the humans. Over the years, after Mar-Vell met his untimely end, others would take up the mantle, including Carol Danvers, a character who is about to hit the big screen in the MCU as the strongest hero we've seen yet in the cinematic franchise. While the two have had some glorious moments in the comics, they've both had their fair share of traumatizing and terrifying experiences over the years. So today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 scariest Captain Mar-Vell moments, which includes the likes of multiple characters who have held the mantle, or really actually just the main two. So with that in mind, let's jump to it. And at number 10, brain damage. Let's start off our list by discussing a pivotal moment in Carol Danvers' comic history, her transformation from regular old awesome pilot human being to a Kree human hybrid, Miss Mar-Vell. In the 1969 Captain Mar-Vell issue 18, back when Mar-Vell was still the captain, he faced off against Yon-Rogg. You know, the character that there's been a whole lot of debate over if Jude Law is actually playing him instead of Mar-Vell in the movies. Anyway, Yon-Rogg, who was a foe of Mar-Vell's prior, busted out something called the Psyche Magnetron, and Carol was nearby. So when it exploded, that's what fused her DNA with Mar-Vell's Kree DNA. But it also did something else too. It caused her some severe brain damage in the explosion. This is what would lead to her dealing with her initial split personality problem. Whenever she would become Miss Mar-Vell, it would be another identity, and it would cause her to black out, which as you can imagine created a lot of problems for the character. We'll be discussing that in detail though later on in our list. Moving on to number 9, kidnapped. Another Carol Danvers number for you folks here. Carol has been kidnapped quite a few times over the years, but the first was particularly traumatizing. So back in the 1968 Captain Mar-Vell series in issue number 8, a villain by the name of Cyber-X was introduced. He's a homicidal robot that Mar-Vell actually created. He was ordered to build it by the organization, but the robot ended up facing off against the hero afterwards. Turns out that Mar-Vell built it too well though. It would use its self-repair abilities to fix its broken parts from that battle, and then show up at Mar-Vell's hotel room in hopes to attack him. But instead, it didn't find Mar-Vell. It found Danvers, who was sneaking around his room trying to expose Mar-Vell for who he really was. At the time, he was just known as his human alias Dr. Walter Lawson. So what does any good villain do with a situation like that? Cyber-X kidnaps Carol, of course, effectively turning her into a damsel in distress, something that Carol was not overly keen about, as you can imagine. Mar-Vell ends up coming to the rescue and saving the day in the end. Up next, number 8, Amnesia. One of the theories surrounding the Captain Mar-Vell film is that Carol has lost her memories of her previous life on Earth. It's something that's pretty much explicitly stated in the film's trailer, although the why and how remain unknown and privy to speculation. Regardless of however Marvel Studios chooses to play that out, one thing is for certain: Carol has a long history of amnesia in the comics, which was likely the inspiration for integrating that aspect of her life into the revised MCU origin story that we'll see play out on the big screen. Now, the first time we see Carol's mind being messed with was in her 1977 solo series Miss Mar-Vell, in which her dual physiologies, Kree and human, would conflict, making her almost black out and not remember the things that she did as Miss Mar-Vell, as we mentioned earlier. Now 13 issues later, Carol would finally accept her dueling identities, with them becoming one and the same during a fight against Hecate. Carol would lose her memories again 2 more times, once thanks to fighting Rogue, more on that later, and then again as Captain Mar-Vell in the 2012 self-titled series, issue 14, when she flew into space to save the world. She then loses years worth of memories in the process. And at number 7, Fascism. Ooh. Carol has had many an impactful story arc while donning the Captain Mar-Vell mantle. Now one of those is the more recent Civil War II, a story event that came out at the same time the MCU Captain America Civil War film was released. While the film is a loose adaptation of the first Civil War story event, this second Civil War in the comics is spearheaded by Captain Mar-Vell and Iron Man, both on opposing sides. The whole plot behind that one is that there's an Inhuman named Ulysses who shows up and has visions of the future. Carol wants to use him to prevent crimes. Iron Man believes that that's wrong, despite the Inhuman's initial prophecies panning out to be true. Of course, this goes too far and she becomes a bit of a pawn for the government and Hydra, expressing some really fascist views on crime prevention. This even causes Kamala Khan, the new Miss Mar-Vell, to start to reject Carol and switch sides, after her mentor demands that she leads a group of children soldiers not dissimilar to the youth factions the Nazis had in World War II. Yikes. And at number 6, Venom. During the Siege story arc, writer Brian Reed had penned various one-shots that followed some of our favorite Marvel characters around during the build-up to the event's major climax. One of these stories featured Peter Parker and Carol Danvers working together, in which the heroic duo took on Venom. And of course, what happened? The Venom symbiote bonds with Carol. Venom, whose host was Matt Gargan at the time, got his butt served to him by Danvers, and she even managed to rip Venom off of the criminal in the process. Venom, being a Clintar, knows a potential powerful host when he spots them, and tried Carol on for size. And the outcome was pretty terrifying to say the least. A hybrid of Miss Mar-Vell and Venom who flew around and had a grand old time making things explode and catch fire until Spider-Man managed to get Carol free of Venom's grip. Eey. Up next at 5, Rogue. Rogue has become one of the most iconic female characters within the X-Men, and for those of you who grew up with the character in the X-Men cartoons or even the 2000 X-Men live-action feature film, it may surprise you that she made her debut in the comics as a villain. Chris Claremont, her creator, initially intended to introduce her in the Miss Marvel series, but that never actually happened. Instead, she first appeared in the 1981 Avengers Annual Issue 10, but still had a bit of a kerfuffle with Danvers, to the point where she actually stole not only Danvers' powers, but her soul. She also tossed Carol off the Golden Gate Bridge, so all in all, not one of Carol's finer moments. Ultimately, Rogue ends up having difficulty with what she absorbed from Carol, having to deal with not only her own self, but Carol's personality as well within her head. In at number 4, Ruins. Here we have a number about the OG Captain Marvel, Mar-Vell, but an alternate universe version of him. In 1995, a series called Ruins was released. It followed a former Daily Bugle reporter, Phil Sheldon, exploring a dystopian Marvel universe that is best described as everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Those are his words in the comic actually. Of course, he runs into Mar-Vell at one point in a Nevada Kree concentration camp. Yeah, Ruins gets real dark at times. Anywho, the camp has been placed in an area where the US used to test nuclear weapons, which has resulted in all of the Kree individuals imprisoned there developing cancer from the exposure to the radiation. Sheldon interviews Mar-Vell, who tells him his story. He was on the Kree spaceship sent to Earth with the intention of liberating the planet. The ships were cloaked initially, but thanks to intermission from the radiation of Silver Surfer's corpse, their fleet was exposed, and the countries of Earth worked together to blast them with nuclear weapons. 9/10 of the Kree people in the fleet died, and the rest, including Mar-Vell, who was the leader of the fleet, were imprisoned, with Mar-Vell no longer believing in Earthlings' humanity. He even tells Sheldon that a few Kree are born here in the camp and that the humans don't help them with their dead. The Kree have to pile them up and burn the bodies. Yeah, like I said, gets pretty dark. And at 3, MODOK's mind control. What's one way to torment a character who has had to deal with kidnappings, amnesia, and split identities? Well, why not add mind control to that list too? Back when Danvers was still Miss Marvel in her first solo series in 1977, she ended up taking on a few big and small villains from the Marvel Universe, including MODOK, the mobile organism designed only for killing. Gotta love creativity in the 70s. In issues 6 and 7 of the series, the villain ends up using mind control on her, tricking her into believing that he's a handsome and charming man, making her see him as tall and strong and beautiful. She even shares a kiss with the hideous monster before she manages to break free of his control. Nothing like swap and spit with the enemy to traumatize you. Gross. And at number 2, the death of Captain Marvel. In 1982, Mar-Vell was killed off in a series called The Death of Captain Marvel. Penned by Jim Starlin, the fellow who brought you the Infinity Gauntlet story arc, Mar-Vell's death was caused by something very different than most other superheroes' demises. He contracted cancer. His exposure to something called the Compound 13 nerve gas was the culprit, and while his negabands kept the cancer at bay, they also caused his body to resist all forms of treatment. The Kree Empire also abandoned him, not allowing him to seek any of their medical expertise since Mar-Vell was considered a traitor. The story follows Mar-Vell accepting his impending death, and many other characters in the Marvel Universe paying him their last respects. His life ends with him seeing a vision of Thanos, one of his biggest adversaries, who comes to him as not a foe but a friend now, guiding him into the afterlife alongside Mistress Death. It's a pretty heart-wrenching story. Mar-Vell is notably also one of the only characters in comic book history to actually stay dead, despite his spirit occasionally popping up in other stories. Finally, in at number 1, rape. Ugh. Carol Danvers has not had it easy. If anything, that should be the takeaway from this list so far. But there's something that tops all of the other terrible things that have happened to her and Mar-Vell combined. Something that comic creators were conflicted on, and something that Chris Claremont chose to undo in his Avengers Annual Issue 10 in 1981. So let's backtrack here for a sec. In the Avengers Issue 200 from October of 1980, Miss Marvel is kidnapped, yet again, by a character named Marcus, who claims to be the son of an Avengers antagonist named Immortus. Now she's taken to an alternate dimension by Marcus where she's brainwashed, again, seduced, and then impregnated. She then gives birth back on Earth, and the baby ends up rapidly aging into another version of Marcus. Ultimately, Marcus had used her to impregnate her with himself so that he could be reborn on Earth. Everyone in the Avengers just assumed that the two had fallen in love, something that Carol later gave them shit for, since Marcus had so obviously brainwashed her. Many a critic and creator had an issue with the storyline, including comic historian Carol A. Strickland, who penned an essay on the event calling it The Rape of Miss Mar-Vell, in which she cited a line from Marcus as constituting rape. I quote, "Finally, after relative weeks of such efforts, and admittedly with a subtle boost from Immortus's machines, you became mine." Yeah, that's f***ed up. Chris Claremont also voiced that the storyline was inappropriate, and that's what prompted his whole Rogue absorbing her memories story arc that we mentioned earlier. Later, when Professor X did restore Carol's memories from Rogue, that's when she lashed out at the Avengers, confronting them about how they failed to look out for her and to realize that Marcus had brainwashed her. Later, Danvers would enter the Pentagon in Claremont's Uncanny X-Men and delete all records of herself as Miss Mar-Vell, giving herself a clean slate, eventually adopting a new persona as Binary after an adventure in space with the X-Men. Alright, there we have it, friends. If that list didn't make you feel real darn morbid, well, we actually have a whole other list that we just did on cannibalism, so if you want to get low, maybe check that one out. All jokes aside, it is great to see that Captain Mar-Vell is finally getting the justice that she deserves in her upcoming adaptation, all things considered. Anywho, if you guys dug this video, show us some love and hit that like button. And if you're new, why not subscribe? Also be sure to take a look at the playlist we currently have flashing on your screen for more great Captain Mar-Vell and Marvel content in general. In the meantime though, thanks for watching folks. I'll catch you all in the next video.